Left Reckoning 195, ladies and gentlemen. 195 episodes of just chill sage wisdom. What is it? I was on Blue Sky the other day, and I was saying how this whole year I'd been saying you need to evolve into a wise chill sage from the angry young man that you are, and it's been a bad year, frankly, to do that. So I think we're kind of in at least angry man stage right now.
No, I mean, there's plenty to be upset about. And, couldn't imagine though somebody better to be chatting and working it through than you, Matt, and all of the wonderful listeners and supporters here at Left Reckoning. This would be a big one. I mean, I'm really stoked to have Ryan Grimm on the program. We're going to be talking about everybody's favorite subject, the squad, a topic that always gets us the most normal comments out of any video or topic that we do.
You know what it is after this election, though? It's sort of like looking for where the Titanic sank, and you got to look for where the sort of scraps are that seem kind of seaworthy a little bit,
Yeah.
and everyone
What to
looks a little
swim
bit
towards,
different,
yeah.
including the Titanic, which everyone thought would never sink, and actually, boom,
Yeah.
it is going down. But yeah,
No, very, very apt. Well, I mean, look, we got a lot we're going to get to, and it's a surprise to nobody. We're going to be still talking a lot about the election, the reactions to the election, and what we need to be doing. But Matt, before we get into some of these answers here, I have to ask you because we've put out some videos, a bunch of stuff, and it has been kind of interesting to see some of the reactions to some of the things we've been putting out, Matt. And I'm curious, are you surprised at how fervent the denial of the working class abandonment of the Kamala Harris campaign has been with certain sectors of the left?
yeah, I said I think a few days after the election that it was like nothing I've ever seen, and it's definitely been like extremely pronounced. Austin Alman, who recently got on this program, had a tweet though that I kind of agree with here, which he says, "It's hilarious that even Shore World is throwing the Harris campaign under the bus for not leaning heavily into anti-corporate message. Seems the only people still resisting this truth are the centrist columnists." Now we have this ad here. I can play it. I uploaded it. I haven't actually even watched this yet, but I'm curious. This was in the top 100th percentile for messaging. Let's see what this could be.
Get it. The cost of rent, groceries, and utilities is too high. So here's what we're going to do about it. We will lower housing costs by building more homes and crack down on landlords who are charging too much. We will lower your food and grocery bills by going after price gougers who are keeping the cost of everyday goods too high. I'm Kamala Harris, and I approve this message because you work hard for your paycheck. You should get to keep more of it. As president, I'll make that my top priority.
I mean, that probably would have helped out a lot of the people who were concerned about all those issues tapped.
And I want to make a point. Like, it's not just that this ad exists. So, see, she was messaging a campaign.
Yeah. Oh, totally.
They spent billions of dollars on media. Okay. I would hope that some of those had a message that would make sense to a regular person. And that it wasn't just all Liz Cheney and democracy, right? The problem is much larger than even the Harris campaign, even the Biden campaign. It's the Democratic Party for over a decade now. They have not emphasized that sort of stuff. And to the extent that they have, it's because they've been sort of like guided into it by Republicans. Mitt Romney having a car elevator in 2012, being literally a venture or a vulture capitalist. He was the last guy that was going to be able to like undercut Democrats. But the very next time they found a guy, they found somebody who could undercut that. So like, and then now it's happened exactly again. And I'm sorry, like Kamala Harris is again a professional, middle class oriented politics, and that is going to lose if you put that forward. That you're going to lose working people on that.
I mean, there's just no doubt about that. And like, we're hearing a lot about this. Like, well, she couldn't have like changed her messaging or blah, blah, blah. It's like, well, you know what? I'm sorry. I don't think that you can discount the fact that that they lean so hard into this saving democracy Liz Cheney thing towards the end. 100%. began to affect people's minds who were sort of maybe on the fence and gettable. But two, yeah, it is true that the Democratic Party, the party that she's been a member of, the party that she's climbed up the ranks of, has very much discredited themselves with working class people. And we're going to continue on this program over the next few weeks to go through some of the history. I know we're going to do that in the post game of these big moments when the Democratic Party betrayed working class voters. But yeah, no, the fact of the matter is that voters aren't stupid, and there's been a lot of people out there who have basically decided that the way they're going to react to this election is to put their heads into the sand, and refuse to try to take any serious lessons from this historic and really shake should be something that should shake your confidence in your political acumen if you lose that bad defeat. And a fundamental aspect of this has been for the past 8 years, ever since the Trump phenomenon sort of came onto the playing field. You had an entire pundit class, an entire consulting class, try to say, we can hand wave away the problem of economic inequality, the failures of American capitalism, by pointing at issues like structural racism and misogyny. And what we've seen now, I think, exceptionally clearly 8 years later, is that that was a massive mistake, because now not only did they not get those voters back into the Democratic fold, they've also continued to alienate more and more folks. And that doesn't even include all the people who were pushed away by the barbaric devotion that Kamala Harris and Joe Biden had to the genocide in Gaza.
Yeah, exactly. And like I gotta say, like people that take voter stupidity as a lesson from this, and not the cat. I mean, we're going to get into a lot of this consultant class stupidity and hubris. It is like, stop paying attention to politics. It's the dissolve the people and elect another sort of thing. Like, it's just like, wow, like the young men thing, right? Like the focus on young men and like without college educations. We literally put interest on people and charge interest on people pursuing education in this country because of the political ramifications. That was a conscious policy choice. And then you deliver for nobody but those people for decades and decades and decades. And your policy is like, I mean, I don't want to get too far ahead of ourselves, but
Well, yeah, let's get on track here. So, we're going to be talking, we've talked a lot about the bad, and, we will continue to do that on this program. But, there have been some kind of interesting moments here, particularly seeing what pundits and politicians and writers out there have been trying to take the lessons, from this election that are kind of undeniable. And we're going to talk a little bit more about Bernie Sanders and AOC in a second. But I wanted to talk about this video here. About a campaign that's very exciting, particularly because of what it represents politically for the Democratic Socialist movement, and also for this very, I think, correct and unique approach. I think one of the most interesting ones that I've seen in a while to this Trump phenomenon. So I will explain a little bit in this video here, but New York saw significant swings in for Trump, which is something that is again is unbelievably surprising. It is something that really should shake your confidence in if you were a Democratic, party official or a Democratic Party pundit, member, whatever. This should really shake your confidence in the strategy that this party has been taking to see how significant these swings have been. And Zoran Mandami, sorry, yeah.
just a little bit of info on that. Eric Levitz was arguing that Trump did not gain 20 points in Queens because the Democratic base stayed home. He says the massive shifts in voting behavior of Hispanic, college-educated, working-class voters since 2012 cannot be explained. But he doesn't offer any. I could do show more, but he doesn't offer any actual evidence for that. Though Aaron from Queens has the numbers here. The total official vote from Queens here, Aaron from Queens. 664,000 votes. That's 125,000 less than 2020. Harris got 164,000 less than Joe Biden, and Trump got 35,000 more. So of the 164,000 that Harris lost to Biden, only 35,000 of those could have been Harris or Biden to Trump pivots. The rest are people who were depressed.
Mm-hmm. So in this video, In this video, Zoran Mandami, who's a DSA member, and he's a member of the New York Assembly, who's running for mayor, goes out and talks to people who voted for Donald Trump or didn't vote at all, and asks them why, which I think is a very unique and important approach to politics. It's something we should be seeing much more of in the near future. But let's play this first bit here to show like how you should react to something like this.
Did you get a chance to vote on Tuesday?
I didn't vote
And why did you not vote?
because I don't believe in the system anymore.
And did you get a chance to vote on Tuesday?
Yes!
And who did you vote for?
The $1,000,000 question. Trump.
Trump. Donald Trump. Well, actually, early voted. I voted for Trump. Honestly, I didn't vote.
She voted for Trump.
I voted for Trump.
I vote for Trump.
Me too.
Before I voted Democrat, at this moment, I voted Donald Trump.
Hillside Avenue in Queens and Fordham Road in the Bronx are two areas that saw the biggest shift towards Trump in last week's election. Even more residents didn't vote at all.
They like Trump because they don't want the Palestinian, the brothers, they killed. The war in Ukraine, the Democrats giving all the money and the war. This is no good.
The swing is because people want lower prices. They probably believe that Trump would give them that.
Market price, all are
Energy, gas.
La comida.
Food.
Most of these people are working families. They're working 1 to 2, 3 jobs, and rent is expensive. Foods are going up. Utility bills are up.
And did you get a chance to vote on Tuesday?
I did.
And then here's the
what
second
Trump
part.
did in the first 4 years, Fordham Road couldn't do that.
There were young voters who didn't vote for her because of the genocide, and I wouldn't have voted for her if I did, but I did vote for her, obviously, because I have common sense.
Can you tell me a little bit more about why you didn't vote?
Since you're out here, Gaza, who should I vote? Either side will go ahead, send bombs from here to kill my brothers and sisters. Palestine issue, and then other issue is like Russia and then Ukraine. He stopped that war. That's why I voted him.
You can't say you're a Democrat and stand for the genocide that's going on in Gaza. Period.
Practically.
Two things on that. I just want to point out what that guy said about like the stop the wars.
Mm-hmm.
This powerlessness affect that Biden has had is a fucking loser. Like it's outrageous to act powerless to what's going on in Gaza, to name just one. And if October 7th never happened, I got to tell you this, that the Ukraine policy also would have depressed these voters. I don't like telling people that. Maybe it'd be great if everyone was just NATO pilled. I have critiques NATO. I think probably not, but whatever. It's irrelevant. The fact is, it's depressing votes. What's his name? Undiplomatic podcast. Van had a good episode on this, and it's just that's in the numbers. Maybe I'll find that for a future post game. But like, people don't like it when they can't meet their material needs, and you see millions of dollars of war material going across the ocean. It's a fucking loser. And also, the wars, you seem powerless to do anything about them.
Mm-hmm. 100%. And like, there's this old kind of truism in American politics that we've heard a million times, Matt. I know you you particularly don't like it, that American voters don't vote on foreign policy. And, I think that is a kind of a misnomer. Like certainly there's aspects of American foreign policy that, probably are in the weeds for most folks, but what people don't like? They don't like wars. They don't like sending American troops and American money abroad to fight and kill other folks. And certainly people are horrified by what they've been seeing in Gaza. Now, if everyone is going to say what one of those gentlemen said in that video, that like, oh, I voted because of Gaza, if that's the majority of this country, sure, that's debatable. But there's no doubt about it that if anything, it affects American politics significantly from this kind of depressed turnout. And one of the things that is undeniable about this Kamala Harris campaign is not only were there some of these swings in certain groups, but there was also just a tremendous amount of people who were staying home. And there's just no way that you can argue to me that the commitment of the Biden and Harris administration to the genocide in Gaza, didn't play a significant role in that depression. If it was one aspect amongst many others, sure, but it played a significant role.
Exactly. Like if this was a case where all of the sort of social democratic elements people wanted to believe were possible in the Joe Biden administration came true, if there was for like major debt forgiveness, if there was the PRO Act, right? Mm-hmm. This would be a different conversation. But as we talked to with Stephen Semler, there's a very clear line of demarcation about 2 years ago where it said, we're done with this ambitious agenda. We're looking to fight inflation by cutting government spending through austerity. And and also we're going to fight world wars. Because make no mistake, there's world war going on right now. And the real question is, like, how hot does it get? Does it get, if a nuke goes off, then we call it World War III. But until then, it's just going to be like, I don't know, like things are very awful right now. And people know that. Yeah. And it's horrible to see people say, like, I think Trump, but you know what? From a person who isn't paying that close attention to the news, compared to Biden, he looks like the peacemaker, and like Bibi is in a position now where he could grant him that title, saying, oh, look we got Trump in office because he is letting us be strong. We're going to, cut the massacres back by a quarter now. And, the Dems, I mean, just another way the Dems really fucked themselves.
Well, they really screwed this up. And like, this is the point that we got to hammer home at. And like, I want the listeners to understand this, and I want people in the rest of the country to understand this, is that like the thing that should give you hope in a moment like this, right, is if you watch this video that Zoran put out, you watch it all the way to the end. I mean, a lot of these people are saying, wow, this campaign seems like something I could really get behind, right? The fact of the matter is that we did not wake up in a more wicked and evil country the day after the election. What we woke up in was a country where people are furious at the people in power. And the fact of the matter is that the Trump administration is going to be a continuation of all of this kind of pilfering of the state, attacks on working class people, and, imperialism and destruction abroad, right? And what this means is that the opportunity to build a real democratic socialist, pro-working class, internationalist, anti-racist, politics is viable, right? And what we should be doing all across the country is having these conversations with people like Zoran is having, where he's talking to them, asking them, what is it that matters to you? What do you think? Well, by the way, here's our movement. Here's what we're doing. And invite people to participate and join, instead of what we've been getting from a whole host of left liberal to even progressive pundits who have been doing this. Oh, American voters are just kind of dumb and they're stupid and they don't understand things. Like, no, people understand a lot more than you recognize. And they do things, they might make a different calculation than you do. As to maybe their voting decisions, but they understand the issues a lot better than you're giving them credit for. And what we must be doing is figuring out how we can make our politics be the ones that benefit from the disillusionment that people rightfully have with the Democratic Party and with the Republican Party.
And we'll play the rest of this Zoran clip, but I just want to say AOC's vote share increasing while Kamala's goes down. That is the indicator I like to see, frankly.
And we have a lot of AOC stuff. We have a lot of AOC stuff to get to later, because, and the hope is there is that there's that leads to a shift in this kind of politics. But yeah, let's play the rest of this clip here.
Democrat. I like Democrat, but I don't like this. Gaza, a lot of people are dying.
Have you voted for Democrats in the past?
I have.
And what would it take for you to vote for a Democrat in the future?
Being able to pay attention to the regular Americans and their economic needs.
They should make economics the forefront of their campaign, because
people were not really feeling it in their pocket.
And there's a couple more where they say, we're tired of being shamed while you run around with celebrities.
And I think, you want to talk about the Kamala Harris campaign and different kind of decisions that they could have made in messaging, and there's plenty to point to. But there's a fact of the matter that this is a deep problem with the Democratic Party. This is from the Financial Times, and this is a very, very important graph here, I think, for the way that people see the Democratic Party. For the first time in at least 80 years, voters associate the Democrats more with social, cultural issues than with class and economic solidarity. And for people listening, I highly suggest you go find it. You can find it on my Twitter. You can find it at the FT. But this graph here shows a significant drop. Matt, do you see where that is? What time of the year, when that was? When people stopped thinking that they were the party of the working class and started thinking it was the party that stands for marginalized groups?
After Romney got out of the way.
I mean, this is significant. I mean, the way that the Democratic Party reacted to the financial crisis, both in terms of what they did in response to it economically, and then what they did politically and culturally around that issue, meant, led to the situation now where people do not consider the Democratic Party the party that stands for the working class, but they associate them with a whole host of other things. And the fact of the matter is if you're watching that clip, I don't need to tell anybody, but this is a diverse crowd of folks out here. And the thing that is really critical to understand about the Democratic Party is that they have made an effort ever since they lost to Donald Trump the first time to say, if you want to talk about class politics in America, you are doing that at the expense of talking about racial justice, gender justice, and justice for queer folks, right? Which is a complete fantasy politics that they've crafted, because I can't remember any of these kind of left-wing populist campaigns that were anti-gay, anti-black, and anti-women that they keep on acting as like been this thing that they've had to put away. What I do know is that they keep on leaning into culture politics at the expense of any other kind of class politics. And the Democratic Party has gotten wider and richer since they've made that pivot.
Yep.
Well, I mean, we got lots of clips we're going to get to later in the evening, but why don't we bring Ryan in here?
One thing before we do that, arms embargo now, there's this DSA stuff, and I'm going to post this in the chat right now, that I cleared the ding dong out. Action Network here, check that out. I'm going to do it a couple times. Be active on the Senate thing. Like, even if, Cory Booker is your senator, or, you got someone who's not going to be receptive, make it a headache in there. And, hopefully there can be some kind of pressure, at least elaborated here, if not, actually changing things.
100% do that. Well, folks, we're going to jump over to our conversation with Ryan Grim, where we're going to talk about some of this history within the progressive movement and the squad. It's always a great pleasure to speak with Ryan. He's definitely somebody you should be following. You probably know who he is already, but there are links below to keep up with it. You should definitely read these books. I mean, both of these books, We've Got People and the Squad, are excellent, really important histories. It's kind of interesting to read, these chapters that we've all sort of lived through. It's really helpful, and there's a lot of insight and perspective there. So definitely pick those up. But yeah, let's jump over to this conversation with
Ryan. Welcome, Left Reckoners. I'm Matt Leck. With me as ever, David Griscom. Hello, David.
Hey, brother.
And joining us tonight is Ryan Grim. Ryan's a reporter at Dropsite News, also co-host at Counterpoints, and author of We've Got People and the more recent The Squad. And it's in that capacity that I want to talk to you, Ryan. Thanks so much for being here.
Hey, it's good to be here. Good to see you guys.
So, Ryan, the thing that I'm kind of, one of the things we've talked about a lot on this show, and it's got us accused of being apologists for AOC and obsessed with tearing AOC down, but is AOC's relationship to movements. And I think most recently, Keeanga Yamada Taylor on The Dig with Daniel Denver kind of alluded to like there being some kind of disconnect there. I think this sort of mystification is in part addressed by your book, especially The Squad, and maybe I'm mischaracterizing this the right way, but the sort of understanding from AOC's side that, look, they needed me as much as I need them. But where we are now, where is AOC's connection to these movements, and how would you characterize it?
Yeah, and people should actually, and I'm not saying this in a self-serving way, I've already gotten paid for the book, but people should read the book for answers on this one, because she talks really openly about her experience starting in 2017, 2018, up through today with these different groups, and they're all different. In some cases, there were groups that had strong grassroots capacity, and that she gelled with, and she, I think, is kind of ride or die with some of those, and then others. I think we're more standoffish to her at first, and I think because she catapulted to such celebrity so fast, she was suspicious of people who or groups who were standoffish in the beginning when she was a nobody, and then when she was somebody, wanted a piece of it. And I think that's probably a pretty universal arc, more so in celebrity, and fame, the world of fame, than in politics, because it's really unusual that somebody kind of takes that arc. Like, we had dozens of people elected to Congress on November for the first time ever. Like, can you guys name any of them? Like, I cover Congress, and I don't even know if, like, off the top of my head I can point to any. So it's extraordinarily unusual that somebody goes from complete obscurity to household name, in a matter of weeks or months. And so I think that colored some of it. And then I think as she became more and more embedded in Washington and in Congress, there's the pull of Washington. And then there's politically, there's the pull of Washington towards compromise, and the groups are pulling you, to a more maximalist position. But then, at the same time, there was this, she would express this suspicion that she wasn't, getting anything out of this. And then instead, they were just using her for fundraising. And from the group's perspective, they'd be like, yes, that is exactly what we're doing. We're using you for fundraising. Like that, we are doing fundraising, though, so that we can help build the ecosystem that will power the ideas and issues that we all care about. Mm-hmm. So, like, if you only look at it in this kind of quid pro quo type of understanding, that's more of a kind of K Street way of thinking about politics rather than a kind of movement focused approach to it. There's also, and she talks openly about what she sees as, misogyny from some of these more left-wing groups, where she'll talk, she'll say, look, Bernie Sanders is taking the exact same position as I am on here. I'm getting dragged. Bernie Sanders is still the cool uncle. Like, why? Like, well, explain that in some other way other than through the lens of gender. And so then that obviously creates hostility. These left-wing groups don't want to be called sexist. So as the Gaza war unfolded, then you get a position where she felt like she was out there in front, calling it a genocide fairly early, getting protested for not calling it a genocide after she'd already called it a genocide months earlier. Original sponsor of the ceasefire, but supporters of let's say like Cori Bush, Rashida Tlaib, folks like that were way further out there. And it's just unquestionable she wasn't as far out as she could have been. That she was still trying to play something of a mediator role, rather than just going all in like a Cori Bush or an Ilhan Omar or Rashida Tlaib. And you didn't really see that tension break out in full among the members themselves until, if you remember, during the Democratic convention, in her speech, she said, she tried to do this this old political play, which you push your kind of ally / internal adversary by saying nice things about them, saying nicer things about them than exist. Like it's one of the oldest political moves in the book. Like Bernie Sanders saying, I'm so glad to be here with my friend Chuck Schumer, who is a robust champion of universal health care. And then Chuck will just standing there, and everybody knows the game that's going on there. Like, he's not actually a robust champion, but Sanders wants him to be, and thinks that by calling him that, he will start to embrace it, and there'll be enough pressure there. When she said that, Kamala Harris was tirelessly working for a ceasefire, that's the mode that play was in, but it landed just extraordinarily flat, particularly because at the exact same time, the DNC is telling the uncommitted movement to go pound sand. That no, we're not going to give you even a 2-minute speech from a Palestinian speaker from the floor here. And I think a day later, Ilhan Omar went to a protest in Chicago outside the DNC and said, it's shameful for our colleagues to be saying that anybody is out there working tirelessly, quoting AOC. Didn't name her, but quoted her and clearly was referring to her. But if you notice that too, that came a week or two after Omar's primary was over, and she squeaked by again in her primary. So not saying that she's above the criticism either.
Well, Ryan, I want to ask you this as somebody who covers, has been covering this. Obviously, you wrote your book about this period of time and the progressive movement, and also you're you're in media, and AOC is an interesting character because I think that there's something about the second we put this video up, we're going to get comments every which way about it. People get very, very passionate about talking about AOC, and I think it's true that she is embedded in Washington, but I wanted to sort of ask your perspective on the ways that she's embedded in Washington. Is it kind of social and structural within the Democratic Party, or are we also talking about votes? Because I think that sometimes there are two different sides of politics that are missed. And I talk to folks and they'll have this perspective that AOC is, voting, to give a bunch of money to Israel and standing against the other DSA members and stuff, which is not entirely accurate. There are some
right. No. And that's not really accurate at all. Her voting record and say a Jamal Bowman or Rashida Tlaib's voting record is pretty similar. In fact, on that famous Iron Dome vote back in 2021, Rashida Tlaib was a no, AOC was a no, and then switched to present, and Jamal Bowman was a yes. And I think you had 9 people who voted no on that. But often often she's one of the no votes. You're right to point out that it's not her voting record where you would situate her as embedded in Democratic Washington. It's more that she just and like many people who are coming to Congress had no. It's a new experience, right? There are new pressures on them. You've got the leadership. The party leadership, then you've got the Republican Party, which is, for a lot of Democrats in blue seats, that's a new phenomenon. Mm-hmm. You spend your entire political life and awakening fighting with Joe Crowley or Chuck Schumer or Hillary Clinton. And those are the kind of entire contours of your fight. Then you get to Washington and all of a sudden there's this whole other party. And for some people, that hits really hard. I think Cori Bush was really punched in the face with it. If you noticed, she was sworn in 2 years after AOC, which means that one of her first moments as a member of Congress was January 6th, and she was you could tell she was scarred by that. Jamal Bowman, he was telling me about during orientation. He and Cori Bush are sitting down. They look over and there's Marjorie Taylor Greene, and there's a whole bunch of other people. They're are these people armed? And this is a whole new political force that they're dealing with. And Cori Bush's first measure as a sitting member of Congress was a resolution to expel, Republicans who'd been involved in some way with January 6th, which isn't the kind of thing that she ran on. But I think people don't appreciate what it's like to be confronted with that party. And when the squad first went to Washington, elected in 2018, January 2019, they're sworn in, Donald Trump's still president. And it's almost boring to from the outs for a lot of people on the left to think about that. Think about Donald Trump. It's more exciting to kind of take on the Hillary Clinton wing of the Democratic Party. Those maybe even more easier to beat. The victory is closer at hand. But their day-to-day life is more expansive.
You kind of alluded to it, but the Bowman and Bush lesson, with AOC, I've always kind of said you can only expect her to be as heroic as the constellation around her. And if, say, 2 of the members are fighting for their lives like Bush and Bowman were and ultimately lost with a large amount of campaign spending, What do you say? Like, how does their loss factor into these things, Ryan?
I mean, I would say it's not just their loss. And my book goes through the 2022 cycle, really in depth as well, which is where this tactic of, spending millions and millions of dollars in Democratic primaries was tried out for the first time. And not so losing Cory Bush and Jamal Bowman is big. And it would be cool if Jamal Bowman runs against Richie Torres because he's really from the Bronx. I think it'd be a competitive race. It'd be really interesting. But so losing those two is huge for the small group that is the squad. But in 2022, they lost a ton of members of Congress who were coming in kind of riding the wave that they had started in 2018 and 2020. So they would have had a much bigger caucus, but they were in caucus, squad caucus or whatever. But AIPAC was able to stop a ton of them in primaries, and in the process were able to get a bunch of others who at the time were leaning towards joining them to kind of step back and say, you know what, actually we're not gonna, this is a little bit too much. And it was really May of 2021 when this kicked off, because that was the last time that Israel launched a war on Gaza. And more than a dozen Democrats went down to the House floor for an hour, booked an hour of time. And it wasn't just the squad, but a whole bunch of Democrats parading through and giving these speeches while Israel was at war with Gaza, just lambasting the government and calling for an arms embargo. And nothing like that had ever been seen on the floor of the House of Representatives before, especially not in the midst of a hot war. You might get a little stray criticism about human rights abuses way after it's over. But to have that kind of thundering criticism from the House floor while it's going on from such a sizable bloc, to have rank and file members of Congress defending Rashida Tlaib, the only woman Palestinian member of Congress, Palestinian American member of Congress, shook AIPAC. And they decided that's when they were going to start spending millions. One of the most kind of important victories that got very little attention was they decided they were going to go after Andy Levin. Andy Levin is this Michigan congressman who was he's a scion of like a political dynasty, Carl Levin and Sandy Levin, or his like father and uncle, senator and Ways and Means chairman. And he himself was president of a synagogue, called himself a liberal Zionist. And when Rashida Tlaib and Ilhan Omar would be getting attacked, he would come to their defense. And he would say, look, as a synagogue president, as a liberal Zionist, let me say that what they are saying is valid. It is not anti-Semitic. It needs to be taken into account. The criticisms they're making are entirely legitimate. And Israel needs to deal with that rather than trying to silence all of these critics. And they were able to knock him out. And so without voices like that, it really did change the dynamic in October 2023 when the next one started.
We've been, very supportive of Tlaib's approach on this past year, not endorsing Biden, but sort of emphasizing, look, we want to beat Republicans. From a moral standpoint, I approve of that. Politically, what's your judgment of how that's played out? And like, is there any sort of pitfalls we should be worried about? Is the party going to come for her? Like, what's your assessment of that? It's
really interesting that they recognize how thoroughly well she represents her district. Like no amount of effort from AIPAC has been able to produce a primary challenge to her that would be remotely threatening. Anybody who they recruited would have to say the kinds of things that would make them unelectable in the district. She what did she outperform Kamala Harris by in her district? Like 50 points or something? Yeah. It's got to be actually a modern day, and you could stretch modern back 150 years to like the advent, post-Civil War of like the Democrats and the Republicans. like it has. I'd be hard pressed to find, in a competitive race with a Republican running, any district where the top ticket performed so terribly, finished in third place or something. In Dearborn, Kamala finished third, but in the district as a whole did terribly. Whereas Tlaib just romped and won it in a landslide. So I think that, she is certainly persona non grata among a huge portion of the Democratic Party, and definitely close to 100% of the Republican Party. I wouldn't be surprised if they were pushed, the Republicans were pushed to boot her off committees, boot Ilhan Omar. Ilhan Omar was removed from the Foreign Relations Committee already. So I would imagine that both of them will be, very much in the crosshairs and will be handed up to AIPAC as tribute of, of like, okay, look, here's a couple things we did for you. Because it's, to them, it's cost free. Like the Republican base, would send them to Guantanamo if they could. And, I don't think the Democrats couldn't protect them if they wanted to. And most of them probably don't want to.
Well, on that, I mean, I'm curious about what level of strength we think exists within the squad right now in Congress and just in politics in general, right? Because obviously the Bush and the Bowman losses are very significant, right? And it felt I'll speak for myself. It felt like between 2018 and 2020 that this was just going to be an ever growing faction within the Democratic Party, and by 2024 we might be sitting with an even larger block. The opposite's happening. They're losing members. So I'm just curious. Obviously, we're trying to look into the future, but what kind of strength do you think exists within that block? To be able, somebody like Tlaib say, look, you can't unseat me. AOC, also having similar things where people voted for Trump and AOC. It would be very interesting to see how she sort of takes that into her political practice. But I'm just curious, your thoughts on their strength and their cohesiveness going into this next session.
I think it's a completely open question. I mean, I think they'll have basically no strength. Certainly in a Republican-dominated Washington, and in the House of Representatives, they are at best an afterthought. They're a nuisance at this point. Going forward, AOC's role is going to be interesting in the Democratic Party because she is becoming really well liked by normie Democrats. Who many of them went from being very skeptical of her because they associated her with the Bernie wing, which they blamed for costing Donald Trump the presidency, and now that doesn't seem to that has not rubbed off on her, or she has been able to shed it one way or the other. So I think she's going to be in the mix when it comes to names of leaders of the Democratic Party broadly, not just the kind of left wing of the party. So then that'll leave people over in the left wing of the party saying, well, are you still with us? Are you leading us? Or do you have a bigger role right now? And if you have a bigger role, then who takes over the Sanders legacy when Sanders moves on? Because that's not obvious at this point.
Yeah, and well, that's the thing, that calculation is interesting, because when she does the thing of Kamala Harris is working tirelessly for a ceasefire, the idea is, I think, theoretically, that will benefit her some way. Either Harris will obviously work and get a ceasefire, or the party will at least reward her loyalty in some way. But if the party is extremely weak, right, then it doesn't look, then the calculation compared to, well, should I, say, and just today she's going at, say, hey, if we're going to have a conversation about special interest groups that are forced us to take unpopular positions, let's maybe start that conversation with AIPAC. And so it is interesting, because I do think which way to go, even from a self-interested standpoint, is not clear to me.
Yeah, no, that's a very good point. And as I'm sure you saw, today she's getting dragged for being anti-Semitic for singling out AIPAC, which, AIPAC really wants it both ways. AIPAC wants to be able to spend, more money than anybody else and do it in a unique way, but not be spoken of in a unique way, because that would be anti-Semitic. And so, and one of the people going after her was one of the Zionists, like liberal Zionists who had she'd gone on. You saw this, right? Spitalnik.
This was one of the times we criticized her. Like, who is this? Yeah. What are we really doing here?
Which is good faith. Which is similar to what you were talking about, the similar dynamic, just in an opposite direction, and saying like, okay, if I do this, it's going to earn me some goodwill, some political capital that I'll be able to use, in the future, when I'm trying to do some type of reconciliation around something. Mm-hmm. Like it'll show that my critiques are coming from a place of good faith. And so she does that, pisses off her entire base, and then the first second that Spitalnik gets a chance, kicks her right in the face with it, and kind of humiliates her for even making the move in the first place.
Mm-hmm. Well, Ryan Grimm, the books are We Got People and The Squad. I reread them this summer.
Cool.
And, I think really good overview of recent history on this stuff that I think people kind of operate as if they remember it, but I mean, it must be maddening to you because there are certain things that aren't mystified, and we can operate off of facts. But yeah, check those books out.
Yeah, you can actually know what happened in some of these cases. Yeah.
Thanks a lot, Ryan.
Thank you.
Yeah, you got it. Take it easy.
Yeah, great to talk to Ryan. And those are really, I mean, as a professional in this, it was good just to have the TikTok chronology of all of this stuff going. That, it's basically happened since I've been professionally doing this. So it's a weird little, I remember when, talking about this stuff with you and Michael back in the day.
It is really so fascinating to get not just like the chronology of it again, but like, those behind the scenes conversations that, we were, as you were probably just saying, like, we were probably saying, oh, I bet this is going on behind the scenes, or that's happening. And getting that information later is very rewarding.
One detail which struck out to me is, and I think I've mentioned this, AOC's first meeting with Pelosi after she won and knocked off what's his nuts is
Crowley,
Pelosi saying, Crowley, Pelosi saying abolish ICE was Russian propaganda, actually. Which is crazy, man. Because it's like, oh, you actually, like, that's the thing I'm coming to terms with is like, they actually, some of the times they're lying. There's a lot of mendacity, a lot of like half truths, but there's an awful lot of belief in insane things that really, like, I mean, ultimately serve themselves. But
well, I mean, that might actually set us up. I totally agree with you. And it is funny seeing a lot of that stuff, particularly the Russian stuff, come back with a vengeance. It truly is something else. I mean, we've played Pelosi saying similar things about all kinds of left-wing critiques of the Democratic Party recently. But just talking about like they really believe this stuff. Matt, we got a couple of clips we're going to play before we go to the post game. Y'all can get access to that patreon.com/leftreckoning, where we have another history lesson. We're going to be talking Lindsey Graham and Barack Obama. We have some more Bernie stuff to get to. We'll be taking questions from all of our wonderful audience members over on that other side. Again, you get access to that patreon.com/leftreckoning. But Matt, talking about people who really believe this stuff, we have this really fascinating clip from David Pakman's program. That'd be wonderful if you could sort of take us through here.
Yeah, so we're going to go to some pretty gross places here. So I want to start off with a little bit of a preamble and a correction, or maybe a credit here. Van Jackson's Undiplomatic podcast, which is what I was referencing earlier, had this section here with Christopher Schell. And I want to show people basically to contrast what good election forecasting analysis is with what we're about to see with really bad analysis. So here is Chris Schell on with Van Jackson. And I found this very interesting. And I remember listening to it before the election thinking like, seems like a bad sign. But here we go.
The hawkishness of the Democratic Party. And in large part, African Americans have not always voted,
Let me go back a little bit because I was watching that sped up.
Always amazed that you do that, Matt. I gotta say,
I know.
It's a superpower. No, I mean that's why you're the super producer. But
there's only so much time.
About the rise of the liberal hawks.
Yes, we saw that.
Yeah, the hawkishness of the Democratic Party, and in large part, African Americans have not always voted, Democrat for a long time. African Americans voted for the Republican Party, early 20th century. Yeah. And the shift in part happened because of the Democratic Party's attention to domestic issues and domestic programs. And in large part, that kind of facilitated the shift of African Americans to the Democratic Party. So it's interesting, seeing how the Democratic Party Democratic leadership has really rethought about the U.S.'s role in the world, especially in the war on Ukraine. And I would say that doesn't necessarily translate to how African Americans, from what my survey is showing, are thinking about U.S. military intervention and the role of the U.S. military. I don't think it's really translated. I think it's actually important. And the reason why I will argue it's important that it's at least addressed is because it's in small part. It's not a major shift, but you do have data that kind of supports the argument that some African Americans are shifting towards the Republican Party. Primarily African American men. The midterm election, there was an article I even.
So you can listen to the whole episode there. That's episode 148 of Van Jackson's Undiplomatic podcast, but turned out to be rather relevant to the outcome of the later election. I bring that up because we're going to talk about a woman named Rachel Bitecofer. Rachel Bitecofer got everyone's attention today, which she has a few times. She had a really nasty one about France and refugees a while ago, but she tweeted this out. I probably won't be able to stop the Schadenfreude when Shahid gets deported. That's what talking about Walid Shahid, who
wrote an excellent piece in The Nation, by the way.
Yeah, he was, I think, one of the best guys around doing this stuff. I think the navigating the waters of uncommitted, and I think he was extremely gracious and well-meaning. But Current Affairs points out the exactly right, nasty stuff.
I didn't realize it was this same person who. Sorry, keep going.
Exactly.
Wow.
Yeah. So Current Affairs points this out: the fact that Rachel Bitecofer, who gleefully fantasized about deporting people, was once advising DNC chair Jamie Harrison should tell you everything. We talked about Jamie Harrison on this program recently. He's a massive lobbyist. I mean, every Boeing, Bank of America, Walmart. I mean, everybody. Jamie Harrison should tell you everything. When leadership listens to voices dripping with this kind of venom, it's no surprise they lost to Trump. Now, Bitecofer, I am ashamed, along with like Adam Gentleson, probably the two sort of most heinous people I remember having on Majority Report. Bitecofer on like 4 or 5 years ago, she had some analysis that we thought was very weird. It wasn't bigotry. I can't remember what it was. I don't think it was as egregious as what she's about to do on Pac-Man, but eventually we're like, this is not the poll watcher we want. Nonetheless, she's gained a reputation as an election guru, the election whisperer. She's credited by none other than David Pakman here in this interview. I mean, she's a big self-promoter. I'm just going to let this plane go over. Yeah. She's the type of person that I watched this Pakman interview. She plugs her book. I mean, bro, yeah. Take a chill pill. But here's her talking with, and to David Pakman's credit, he asked the relevant question here. This was about 7 months ago.
It seems really like retail strategy. You have to spend hours or days with people to get them to sometimes reconsider. It seems to me easier to find the 40% of the electorate that doesn't vote, focus on the people that are already sort of on our side, and explain to them the importance of getting out to vote. Do you agree that that's a more effective strategy, a better use of time? And how do you motivate those folks to get out and vote and about the importance of voting?
So, David, the hypothetical that you pose, a Trump person, a person that likes Donald Trump, is voting for, Republicans and likes Trump and doesn't see any issues with there wasn't an insurrection. That person, there'd be zero utility in trying to convince them to vote not for Trump. But there's another part of it, and that's about, if you think of his 60 million votes in 2020, it's about half, maybe 60% of that coalition, maybe 70. But there's another 30% of that Republican coalition that's voting for Trump because of brand loyalty to the Republican brand. And it's a very imagistic, loyalty. It's, when I think of Republicans, I think limited government, good on the economy, low taxes. Those are the people there's utility to focus on. And the reason is, as I've alluded once already, to the realignment or de-alignment of non-college educated voters, first whites, and now everybody to the right, as they've been hit with this propaganda grievance strategy, okay? But there's a second realignment as a product of the first. As they did the stuff that did that made people who don't have the education to ward off the effects of propaganda, they were doing.
Oh, my Lord.
Can we just pause here for a second? Mm-hmm. Apparently, conservative propaganda was invented in 2012-ish.
Yeah.
What's happening is the bottom dropped out of the economy for everyone but, say, political scientists with PhDs. And it's obvious to all of them and not to any of these people. So why is it that people might be receptive to a guy who's been synonymous with wealth building for 30 years in popular culture like Donald Trump after Barack Obama delivered for bankers and no one else? Okay. Fair enough. There's some good stuff with Detroit and the auto industry, whatever. Ultimately, he did not bail out homeowners. He bailed out banks, and he defended doing so. We've discussed that exact speech in 2009 on this program, and people realized it, man. And people's and that is also in the context of a long-term decoupling of wages with productivity in this country that coincides with the drop of unionization. People have been getting screwed. This is not even just COVID inflation. There's a lot of people who just want to say, well, look, everyone lost after COVID inflation. Is that really just it? Maybe we should widen the aperture out a little bit. But so really insulting stuff, and apparently it's just propaganda, this grievance politics.
Totally. This is what is so rich. It's one of those things that is just so fundamental, I think, to this new look, they got it. They wanted a different coalition, and they got it now. Best of luck to them as they build it. And that coalition is wider and richer and less attached and committed to fighting for working class people. And I'm sorry, the arrogance is palpable. And this idea that these people don't understand their own interests, we do. No, people understand that y'all being in power has meant massive giveaways to the wealthiest people in society. The propping up of a particularly nasty industry, Silicon Valley, that is now preying upon the country. And yet you might say, oh, but excuse me, sir, Silicon Valley is all supporting Trump. Yeah, because they weren't loyal. And that was a really stupid fucking move for the Democratic Party to react to a massive failure of the American financial system, the inequality of the American system, and say, you know what we just need a different class of California billionaires to kind of clean this system up. No, it created a lack of trust amongst the traditional base of the Democratic Party. Now, of course, that started at the onset of neoliberalism with Jimmy Carter, accelerated by Bill Clinton, and then Obama really just embraced the final chapter of this transition away from working class voters with his giveaways to the richest amongst us and the bankers.
And this is an advisor to DNC chairperson Jamie, Harrison.
Harrison, yeah.
Himself,
who's also a big loser.
A pedestrian group lobbyist. Yeah. So let's understand what's happening here. This is not good faith disagreement and people just looking at the data and it's one of us is touching the elephant's tail and one of us is touching the trunk and we all just got to come together. No, this is the people who are responsible for selling out the working class base that the Democratic Party had to donors, saying, take those motherfuckers for granted. Take the people who are, that actually do care about foreign policy in an election and what American empire is doing. Take them just tell them to fuck off. Never mind that maybe they played a role in Obama, beating Hillary, or whatever. Just take all those people for granted and go after. I mean, we haven't even got to the juice of this yet. What her strategy is. So let's, without further ado, let Rachel, after she insults the stupid people that can't recognize propaganda.
Percent of that Republican coalition that's voting for Trump because of brand loyalty to the Republican brand. And it's a very imagistic, loyalty. It's, when I think of Republicans, I think limited government, good on the economy, low taxes. Those are the people there's utility to focus on. And the reason is, as I've alluded once already, to the realignment or de-alignment of non-college educated voters, first whites, and now everybody to the right, as they've been hit with this propaganda grievance strategy, okay? But there's a second realignment as a product of the first. As they did the stuff that did that made people who don't have the education to ward off the effects of propaganda, as they were doing that, it caused a problem in the burbs for them. Smart, college-educated, traditional suburbanite Republicans didn't like it, okay? And you start to see them leave the party really even before Trump, but it escalates quite a bit with him and his nomination. And there's still a lot of those folks out there. So my work as a strategist is getting campaigns to focus on that bucket and break their brand loyalty, because it's not about selling a candidate or a guy. You have to get them to feel like the brand of voting for Republican is bad and they are embarrassed to do it, right?
Now, again, let's be very clear. This is what the Harris campaign did, and it failed. And the numbers are in that fewer Republicans crossed to vote for Harris than did for Biden. It's over. It's Jover for her. And she just admitted it right there, that one of her jobs, advisor to DNC chairperson Jamie Harrison, is to get them to focus on those voters, and they did not get them.
So basically, you have a whole strategy that the basis of the theory is that American voters are stupid, right? And the only people we can talk to are people who have this propaganda shield. By the way, what we're talking about is people who make more money. It's it's
probably
these guys are smarter. Yeah. It's we're not going to run on the economy or working class issues anymore because the voters are too stupid. No, basically, people are getting the message, and those voters aren't stupid. They're getting a very clear message about where your priorities are as a party. And as we said back in 2020 on this program, the fact of the matter with the Biden coalition was, maybe it worked in this moment, but that's a very dangerous gamble to take with those suburban right-wing voters, because guess what? They're not particularly loyal to your political project or to your party. And Matt, I know we had this at the beginning, but could you just bring up what she said about Waleed again? Because I just... what's so frustrating about a lot of people in the Democratic Party is, one, how bad they are at politics, because it enables and empowers the right wing to do truly horrendous things to the rest of us. But on top of how bad they are at politics, the lack of fucking humility with these people to admit, hey, you know what? I've been driving this car in the wrong direction and we might be driving off of a cliff. Instead of saying, oh, you know what, maybe we should pump the brakes, change strategy, turn around, they just turn around and start insulting everyone else in the vehicle. So this, again, is that person who you just saw on Twitter saying, I probably won't be able to stop the Schadenfreude when Shahid gets deported. A truly, truly disgusting moment here. And it really, I have to say, is particularly fascinating to see how every Democratic official, once they get pushed a little bit, just turns out to be this guy.
Yeah, Obama admin State Department guy, right? Is that what it was?
So
Cool
that's
stuff.
that's the Democratic Party. I mean, truly, horrendous to see that kind of stuff. And again, and saying this about Shahid is so disgusting, because what Uncommitted was doing was trying to say, please allow us to try and get votes for this party. Just allow us to be able to say, there is some reason or this reason. And all that they got from the Harris campaign was literally, I'm speaking, insulting them at the DNZ convention, and then bringing in Richie Torres, who is known by nobody except for people who follow Israel Palestine stuff, because he is known as one of the most psychopathic Zionists in the U.S. Congress, which is saying something. Bringing him to Michigan, right? That's what the Harris campaign provided to these folks. I mean, really so nasty to sit here and say that you want this person to be punished for trying to help y'all win, and y'all refused. Sorry, Matt. That's just
No,
disgusting.
I agree. Like, and honestly, it's the dialectic, because I totally hear the people who wanted a more severe approach than Uncommitted took. But taking the extremely reconciliatory approach that they did and getting the door slammed in their face nonetheless really drives the point home forward in a way that's just completely undeniable. Like, it's insane. Yeah, and this is again a long-term strategy. We're gonna be continuing our series where Democrats went wrong.
Yeah.
Of course, a big part of that is blaming Obama, which we're going to do more of in the post game. But also, we talked about Schumer in a recent Sunday show, doing exactly what Bittkoffer said there, which is for every working class person in Western Pennsylvania we lose, we will gain 2 in the educated, moderate suburbs of Eastern Pennsylvania. And you know what? They turned out more 100K voters. They did.
I mean, this
Good
is
job.
I'm sorry, and I know, and we have so much Trump stuff and like what the strategy needs to be going forward to do. But like, this really needs to be a moment where the entire thesis of politics of these people is just shown to be completely and utterly false, and not just wrong on the margins, wrong totally. And not just wrong for one election cycle, wrong in what it has done to American politics here. Because as we said earlier in the show, since they took on that strategy, that political strategy, that the Pelosi-Schumer strategy, the Democratic Party has gotten whiter and richer, and the Republican Party has gotten more working class and more diverse. Right? I mean, it is truly, if it was something that they did believe was, the kind of party that they wanted to build, they have been shown that it is a completely disastrous political strategy in achieving victory, if that is their goal. But maybe it is better to have a wider and wealthier political party so that y'all can fundraise and make money off of running failed political campaigns.
Yeah. So good. So yeah, in the post game, I don't know if there's more we want to get to here, but look forward to Lindsey Graham being to the left of Obama on banks.
We're going to get to Lindsey Graham. Yeah, that's an unbelievable clip, and y'all aren't going to want to miss it. And you get access to that by signing up to become a patron, patreon.com/leftreckoning. But before we go, Matt, I wanted to play a little bit of this AOC stuff, because as longtime listeners of this program know, we've had plenty of criticisms of AOC, particularly about her relationship, to the socialist left, the democratic socialist movement in this country, about some of the things that she has highlighted in her campaigns. We were very upset, obviously, with her decision to come, to stop campaigning for Bernie Sanders, for example, because of the Joe Rogan thing. But this is a moment where if people want to get on the train and they want to join the fight and they want to build this movement that can actually take on not just the right, but the members of the Democratic Party establishment, who are pushing this disastrous campaign, and attacking people all across of all different backgrounds, who are trying to say to the Democrats, y'all have to do something different. We're here for it, and I think it's a really interesting thing. We'll see how far it goes. But AOC's had a very interesting day the day after the election, when it turns out that there were plenty of people in her district who voted for Donald Trump and voted for her. And she's done a lot of events on social media. She's done these kind of Q&As where she went and asked people who supported her, who voted for her and voted for Donald Trump, what their reasoning was. And I find this to be a really interesting and I think correct thing to do as a politician, just basically understand what the voters want. I think that is your job. And it's going to be interesting to see, how AOC, takes this moment. But we have this clip here, unless you want to add anything before it of AOC.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of folks who we've covered this on Majority Report, talked about, these people are stupid, and it's like, well, if you better get really good at stealing elections, or you should probably take a listen to what voters actually have to say, and maybe a little bit of humility might go a long way as well.
Yeah. So this is AOC on Joy Reid's program, who people remember we covered last week, who said Kamala Harris ran a flawless campaign. She got the Queen Latifah endorsement.
Doug, Joy is sort of like Sammy Sosa. It's like sometimes she's a home run if she's covering Gaza. Sometimes it's a strikeout if maybe it's Russia related.
This is an interesting one here, but let's play AOC. So this is AOC talking about why this swing to Trump happened.
Right. And I think we saw some of that happen as well. But when it comes to people who split their ticket, I think a lot of people cited several different things. One is there is universal frustration in this country. Much of it, I actually think, justified, that is raging at a political establishment that centers corporate interests, billionaires, and puts their needs ahead of the needs of working Americans. And we know that we can either channel this righteous rage, because there are people whose SNAP was cut off, their child tax credits were cut off, but they're seeing people like Elon Musk getting tax breaks and kissing up to Donald Trump in order to do so.
But they vote for them. Why vote for Elon Musk and Donald Trump?
So we're going to get to that second part in a second. But Matt, I mean, what are your reactions to that breakdown from AOC? I mean, I think that, especially for that MSNBC audience, noting that people are very upset, and rightfully so, she says, about an economy that's more and more unequal, about the power that the rich have in our politics. I mean, that is a very different thing from the Eddie Glaude clip we played last week, or some of the things that Nancy Pelosi has said about a kind of sober look at what's been going on within the Democratic Party and how it relates to working people.
It's so dangerous, I think, the Glaude method of taxonomizing. Okay, maybe there is a sliver of justified rage, but I actually want to focus on the white people's rage is about restoring white supremacy. I think that is so goddamn dangerous. And for Democrats to not understand this, which Eddie Glaude was talking about abstaining from voting for Clinton in 2016, and he understood, voting has a lot of moral valencies to it, and say you don't want to judge somebody who voted for, say, Kamala Harris as a genocide supporter just because that's the most heinous way you could take it. You shouldn't take Republicans as the most heinous way you can take it either. We should be real that there is a certain appeal to far right policies in this country, but I do not think that is a mass is capable of being a hegemonic power unless the actual good people are suppressed by, say, I don't know, a corporate class of people who basically want to commodify the civil rights movements and everything good that's been done in this country as something to sell to donors every 4 years to get fundraising money.
Total. I mean, and like the civil rights movement, you can't think of a better example of that. Something that was connecting the fight for racial justice in this country to the fight against capital and power of entrenched capitalism. And now, there has been this kind of faux fight between fighting for justice for working people and fighting, against racism in America, which is extremely damaging to both projects, by the way. But we'll talk a little bit more about that in a minute, because the second response here from AOC, I think, is really interesting. And I think it's very different from maybe I'm wrong about this, but I think the way she's talking about this issue is very different from how she may have talked about it in the abstract a couple years ago. Which is understanding, part of Trump's appeal here. So I'll play this, and I'm really excited to hear your thoughts on the other side of this, Matt.
There is something to be said about it doesn't matter that he's lying. He's saying that I'm fighting for you. In all of this debate that people are talking about with this woke thing, right? Yeah. Oh my gosh. It's because we care about trans people, and that's why.
And by the
there's
way,
a
only
backlash.
Donald Trump cared about trans people
Right.
because he was the one running $130 million worth of ads. The Harris campaign said nothing about this issue.
That's right. That's right. And listen, the ads, it's not to even deny the fact that these ads were effective in certain areas. What I think people are paying too much attention to is the first half of that ad, which says Kamala Harris is, or that said, Kamala Harris is for they, them. Everyone's focusing on that. They're not focusing on the second half of that ad, where he said, Donald Trump is for you.
Yeah. Yeah.
And Democrats very often, in their messaging, they speak and in terms and in concepts and not in the second person. I care about you. And political races are not about one candidate versus another candidate. Too often it gets pigeonholed like that. It is a race to convince a person about who cares about you more.
And just I would have loved to have continued this thread if I had been interviewing AOC. Joy Reid immediately starts pivoting to talking about how worrying RFK is, which fine enough topic, but I think you're getting somewhere kind of politically interesting.
That's an example. Sorry to cut in, but that's actually a perfect example. Is he's filling a vacuum, and so there's a vacuum being left by the sort of inability for Democrats to move on from Obamacare. And now it's about maintaining Obamacare. In 2016, it was saving Obamacare. Well, what's next? What is actually there? Because affordable, you may have got some patient protections in there, which are welcome. I like when the government does that sort of stuff. You did not make it affordable. The Affordable Care Act is a misnomer. And that is because a failed approach, frankly, comes from a lineage not unfamiliar to maybe Project 2025 type folks. So maybe we actually do need to address things like Medicare for all. And I know like a bunch of people, because of the primary and Bernie Sanders' prominence there, maybe thought, well, this is an avenue to push towards that. I remember Barack Obama in the push for the Affordable Care Act, when I started following politics on a daily basis, reading Ezra Klein's Wonk blog, my RSS feed. It was, maybe we do this and it sets a precedent for a public option, which I will remind people was in Joe Biden's 2020 platform.
Don't get me started on 2020. Yeah. I mean, 100%, man. And like, I think that the way that she's speaking about this issue is really good. And we'll see, how far it goes, where it goes. But I think it's absolutely critical for multiple reasons. One, I can't imagine a better audience to receive this kind of message than the MSNBC one, because there are a lot of desires, I think, to demonize large sections of this country, which, frankly, that kind of politics is wrong on multiple levels, but just on the most like selfish one. If you believe that this country is just kind of like set as like, reactionaries and all these kind of things, then what's the point of politics? Do you know what I mean? It's just like, if this is just how it is, then, what's the point of doing anything? Now, I don't believe that. I think that, people are actually being pretty clear that what they want is an end to economic system and the insecurity and suffering that is just felt all across this country. And guess what? When you ask people why they voted or didn't vote, they'll tell you usually that. Now, what I think is really great about this clip from AOC, though, is that like one, I think she like is making a real effort to say we should listen to what people are saying instead of pumping all of our kind of nonsense and casting aspersions about what's in their heart or all their what's their morality. But I think the second bit, particularly about recognizing the appeal and the effectiveness of that Trump ad in particular, it's something that we talked about on this program too, Matt. Is like one of the things that with the trans stuff is we wondered like how effective it was going to be, because as an issue, it's not something that's particularly motivating except for a very specific kind of person. But as AOC noted there, I totally agree, and we said this on the show before the election, was that when you present it in ways like, look, they're the Democrats are into like talking about all these other kind of issues. I'm here for you, which is what Donald Trump's final message was there. I think that's a very effective like read on what's going on, and it's critical for two reasons. One, so we understand those voters, and two, because I'll tell you right now, despite the fact that our wing, Matt, Bernie people, Democratic socialists and stuff have been saying that like we want to like mix some kind of reactionary social politics with economic populism, right? You know who is doing that right now? It's all of the goddamn fucking pundits who for the past 8 years were accusing the Bernie movement and DSA members and all these folks of being racist, misogynist, etc. Right? Those are the ones who are going to say, you know what, Donald Trump was really effective with this they/them ad. We need to throw trans people to the wolves. Right? So I think it's decent messaging from her there.
And I also think I think people aren't real about how Americans view Donald Trump. Like, people don't pay attention to politics, right? Like, and people in 2016 to 2020 was a long time ago, and relying on that was so stupid because he has. I mean, I guess I don't want to get off track on that. But that's ridiculous.
No, I mean, no, I hear you. I hear you. So, anyways, I mean, look, we'll see. We'll see where it goes. I mean, I think this is a real opportunity for lots of folks out there to reset and reorient. And I'm not holding my breath or anything like that, but I find that to be a very encouraging, answer, or at least shows that she's thinking about these things in a very good way.
And it's just factually true that you increase your voter percentage in an election where the top of the ticket got theirs completely wiped out.
Yeah.
Doing something right. So
yeah. Well, folks, talking about doing something right. You know what you should do? You should go over to patreon.com/leftreckoning and support the program. Matt and I are working hard. We got a lot of really great guests coming up. I hope y'all really enjoy that conversation with Ryan Grimm. Matt has been deep in the archives, dusting off those old YouTube videos, and we got a lot of Obama era stuff to get to. Really excited to talk about Lindsey Graham and Obama, and in our ongoing series about lessons we should take from the Obama administration.
Should we play Lindsey Graham out, or should we save it?
We should save it. Let people come in fresh.
Yeah. Patreon.com/leftreckoning.
Come and do that. We also got some Bernie, some Pelosi, and we'll also be taking y'all's questions. So you won't want to miss it, friends. Come see us on the other side. Patreon.com/leftreckoning. Appreciate everyone so much. It's always so great to see you. We'll be back soon.